Do not search for the terms discussed in this video on Google or elsewhere, as you could be committing a crime. The findings have been reported to authorities and the research supervised by legal counsel. No illegal imagery is shown. Do not contact or harass anyone mentioned. Attempts to unjustifiably remove this video will result in a legal dispute.
Let's talk about editing. Editing is taking all that you went through in production, from the perfectly lit shots to the awful takes you never want to look at, and turns it into a story worth watching. Which program you decide to edit on doesn't matter. It's about finding your voice. And that's what I want to talk about today. You see, there are a few cuts that you can try out that add a whole lot more weight and meaning to your video. Let's call it 9 essential cuts every editor should know. First things first, let's kick it off with the basics. It's gonna be your standard shot. Now this is exactly what it sounds like. It's gonna be the end of one scene and the start of another. It's just putting two clips together. No flair, no fuss, no added meaning.
Welcome to Open Your Reality, my friends. Have you ever heard of the Saturn Time Cube, also known as the Black Cube of Saturn? If you haven't, then this video is going to blow you away. And if you have, then you may just learn something new. Now, I just want to say this is a little bit of a different setup. This is my office area, but you can't see my computer, but my computer and my desk are right here. And this is going to be more of like a podcast. So if I mess up at any time, I'm just going to leave it. Because lately I haven't had the time to really, and this is going to be a long video, by the way, as you can probably see. Now, I want to preface this entire video by saying the information in it comes from a Twitter post put out by Nick Hinton in July of 2019. And just in case you didn't know, Nick was a guest on my show last month, and it was a fabulous interview. And I'll post the link to the interview in the description, as well as a link to the Twitter thread should you wish to read it. So thank you, Nick, for this awesome info. And if you're watching, buddy, let's do another interview soon for sure. So in his post, he did an awesome job of piecing together data from all different areas to construct a theory that may explain why our world is so messed up. And it all relates to Saturn and the Time Cube. And I'm gonna jump into it full bore in a few seconds. I just wanna say, if you have the means and you love my channel, please support it if you can. You can do so via Patreon or make a one-time donation on PayPal, and all the links are below. And thank you to all the people who are currently contributing.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
All right, with that said, allow me to take you on a spectacular journey for the next few minutes. Now, it started for Nick when he began noticing that all throughout the world, across all different cultures and religions, and throughout various films, literature, and other media, there is this one consistent theme that just keeps presenting itself over and over. And that theme, you got it, is the cube. You may not be aware of it, but the cube is a part of Jewish, Muslim, and Masonic traditions. And it can also be seen in places like the United Nations Meditation Room, Mecca, the 9/11 Memorial, and art installations everywhere. And I mean everywhere. The cube has been a central plot device in films like The Cube, of course, Escape Room, Transformers, The Avengers, and many other movies. And in these films, the cube is portrayed as this hyperdimensional object or even a prison, which has the power to bend space and time. Now, Nick believes the cube represents physical reality, and we'll get into this shortly. So here's a quote that Nick put in his post referring to one from Plato, where he says, "To Earth, then, let us assign the cubic form, for Earth is the most immovable of the four and the most plastic of all bodies." Gee, and I thought the most plastic of all bodies was found in Beverly Hills. So Plato and the ancient Gnostics believed this world was a counterfeit created by an ignorant and flawed god known as the Demiurge. They believed the Demiurge trapped our spirits in this false reality and it was up to us to free ourselves from it using gnosis, or secret knowledge. And if we didn't succeed in doing so, we would be forced to reincarnate and start again from scratch. Ancient Buddhists and Hindus believe something along the same lines, but instead, they called the material world Maya, or illusion, and the cycle of reincarnation samsara. So there is currently a newer theory that echoes these same sentiments very closely. Can you guess what it's called? Simulation theory. And you know I talk a lot about it in my channel. Now there are more and more scientists and philosophers alike. I always say that word, I say philosophers alike are claiming we might be living inside a giant computer simulation or a virtual reality. Whichever you like is fine. Even the almighty Elon Musk said he's certain we're living inside a computer simulation. Now, some people say he only put the odds at like 1 in many billion, but to him and to me, that's certainty. So movies like The Matrix, The 13th Floor, and Existence illustrate this idea quite well. And although it's been around for some time, the theory seems to be gaining a lot more traction in the last few decades, and has become even somewhat of a meme. Now, there's a lot I can personally add to this, especially the part about the demiurge. I even made a whole video on this in June of 2019 called Why Earth is a Prison Planet for Consciousness. A lot of you know that David Icke talks a lot about the demiurge, as does Wes Penra and a few others. We'll get a little bit more into that, but I just want to give you the basics just so you understand. So the universe was created by God, but somewhere along the lines, a group of beings known as the Archons partitioned off a piece of it and enslaved the conscious beings there. And that is where we are right now. We are those conscious beings. So in a sense, we're living in a matrix that does not resemble the real universe. And I look right outside my window and I can see that's not the real universe, although it looks really pretty. But when I look around other parts of the world, I kind of feel that way sometimes. For example, many species on the planet, including us, rely on eating other species to survive. Think of how grotesque that really is, to eat an animal alive and drink their blood and organs. Would a truly loving God have made it so that animals have to literally eat each other alive to live? I mean, even vegans and vegetarians have to eat plants. And by the way, guys, I don't know if you can see this, but this is my lovely plant that sits on my desk. Very good for helping with the oxygen. I planted that myself. So David Icke asked the same question in his books, which I read a long time ago. So I've been thinking about this for a while. And we just take it for granted, but anyway, let's just continue with the post. So Nick believes that the cube represents the simulation we're in, and it's taking place inside a giant quantum computer. Now, ironically, D-Wave's quantum computers are shaped like giant black cubes, and you can see that right here. And perhaps it's no coincidence. Quite not, I don't think so. The creators of these machines claim they're capable of reaching into parallel universes to pull out information and find solutions to problems faster than regular computers. And thanks to you guys and your donations, I recently bought a faster computer, I upgraded, and let me tell you, I definitely don't think it's reaching into other dimensions. But D-Wave can. And currently only a few have access to that technology. Namely those at Google, CERN, the NSA, NASA. And CERN is home to the world's largest particle collider, and also birthplace of the internet. Well, that's according to Nick's post. I don't know about that. If I'm wrong on that, correct me. So as you already know, CERN has been accused of trying to open portals to another dimension. This just sounds outrageous at first. However, it isn't too far-fetched to believe when you realize that the scientists who work at CERN have even said this themselves. Here's a quote from Sergio Bertolucci, Director for Research and Scientific Computing at CERN. He says, and I quote, Out of this door might come something, or we might send something through it, end of quote. And one of the craziest things about CERN, if it doesn't altogether sound outrageous, is that right outside its doors stands a statue of Shiva, the destroyer, dancing her dance of destruction inside a Stargate, of course. Now, Nick doesn't believe this type of overt symbolism needs any further explanation, and either do I. Shiva, however, has connections to Jehovah, the God of the Old Testament, as well as, you got it, Saturn. Nick sees these three deities as one and the same. Basically, different names for the Gnostic demiurge. And the cube not only represents our false reality, guys, or the Matrix, but it's also an altar to the god of limitation. And Nick points out that Gordy Rose, the founder of D-Wave, compared his quantum computers to an altar to an alien god. He also mentioned that the black cube in the UN meditation room is supposed to be an altar to the God of all. So then Nick posed the question of why a cube? Now here's where the post gets really freaky. In 1981, during the Voyager mission, NASA discovered a massive hexagonal storm on the North Pole of Saturn. And if you draw some lines on the inside of a hexagon, it quickly becomes a two-dimensional view of a three-dimensional cube. In times of antiquity, Saturn was known as Kronos, the god of time. And the story goes that Kronos was told a prophecy that one day, one of his children would usurp him as king. And after hearing this, he decided the only rational thing to do was to eat all his children. Of course, makes complete sense. So this myth illustrates the cycle of death and rebirth, creation and destruction. And for this reason, Saturn and its rings are associated with the Ouroboros, which is basically the serpent biting its own tail. Now Kronos, also the god of harvest, carried a scythe, a scath, not sure on that. And this is where the Grim Reaper comes from. Saturn's relation to the serpent makes us think of Satan. Saturn is the sixth planet from the sun. It has a six-sided shape on its north pole. And the sixth day of the week is Saturn Day, the Sabbath, 666. You see how this all ties together, people? Then Nick posed the question if there is a link between Kronos' baby-eating habits and the, I dare to say this, but I'll say it in a different order, sacrifices of, young ones that are talked about. But I really don't want to go there. I don't want to get into it, so we'll continue on with the post. So the serpent also looks very similar to the sine wave, says Nick. Funny how the sine button on a calculator says sin. The Bible says that we die because we are born into sin. But could it really be because we are born into the sine, the cycle of time? So Nick goes on and says, in our world, we are told money rules the world. We're also told time is money. And if you turn the sine wave on its side, it looks oddly similar to something we are all very familiar with. Now at this point in the post, Nick notes that a low frequency sine tone creates a hexagon in a medium. This has been confirmed by the study of cymatics. For those that don't know what cymatics is, it's basically the study of how sound waves affect matter. For example, in the 1960s, a scientist by the name of Hans Jenny proved that different sound frequencies create different geometrical patterns in sand, dust, and fluid. And these materials sat on a metal plate and were exposed to an oscillator that produced a broad spectrum of frequencies. And this is one of the reasons why some Buddhist monks chant. And these sound frequencies can affect our bodies as well, which is why I've talked so much about the power of binaural beats for increasing your extrasensory powers. They really have an effect on the brain. Anyway, Nick postulates that something inside Saturn is causing the hexagon shape to form. You think? He explicitly asks, What is inside Saturn creating this frequency? Now, Saturn is also emitting what NASA calls eerie radio emissions. And you can hear what they sound like on YouTube.
And let me tell you, it's downright creepy.
Let's hear some right now. I have some loaded up already here on YouTube. And let's just hear what they sound like, shall we? Ugh. Yeah. You see what I mean? That is creepy. That is certainly creepy. All right, let's get back to the cube. So like Nick said earlier, the cube is a hyperdimensional object, and he thinks it's meant to represent a tesseract or four-dimensional cube. The fourth dimension being, of course, time. And this is also what they call the cube in the Avengers movies. Another good example of a movie with the tesseract would be one of my favorites, which is Interstellar, which I actually just talked about in a recent video on anti-gravity, which you can see here. Nick said there are too many movies to mention that feature cubes, but if you do a little bit of research, you will find them everywhere. So do that research, guys. That's the least I could ask you to do. I'm just kidding. You don't have to do that research. But how did the ancients know Saturn had a hexagonal shape on the top of it? How could they possibly make all these associations without telescopes and satellites? I want to know that. Well, actually, I do know that. I would make the case that the ancients knew about the details of planets and star systems because the aliens beings who visited them told them. The alien beings have been here since the dawn of civilization, as I've said in my other videos. And I mean, to me, this is really quite obvious. Now, Nick says that there are some theorists that believe in the very distant past, the planets were arranged much differently. Now, I don't know too much about this, so I won't say anything, but this would have been the golden age, according to Nick, when things were good and Saturn wasn't angry from hearing the prophecy yet, whatever that means. Supposedly, this was when Atlantis thrived and Saturn hung stationary in the sky directly overhead. Now, personally, I don't know about this. I'm not going to comment on it. If Nick ever comes on my show, we'll ask him. So, according to some theorists, Nick said, the biblical Tower of Babel story is actually an allegory for one of the celestial configurations experienced in the past. And the Tower of Babel was supposedly a tower that reached into heaven. And the people wanted to go to war with God and become God. Now, on a personal note, could it be they were trying to go to war with the alien beings that were enslaving them? Maybe, I don't know. Just something that I postulated or speculated on. Now, Nick says, and I quote, I believe a rotating hexagon in the sky would have been seen as some sort of portal into the heavenly realms. Perhaps we, the sons of Kronos, at one point somehow attempted to make it into that portal and usurp the throne. That is really interesting, Nick, because so what you're saying is that we tried to get into that portal so we can kind of get out of this matrix.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense.
But I don't think that we can actually build a tower that gets to Saturn. Perhaps we are trying to do this again. This makes more sense. So scientists at CERN say they are searching for the God particle and have even called the machine the Tower of Babel. So now you are beginning to see that CERN really has a different agenda than what they've been telling us. And I do believe that it could very well be that CERN has caused the Mandela Effect, that CERN actually is the new Tower of Babel, that they're trying to get into this portal. Maybe they're trying to get out of this matrix. Maybe that's what it's really all about. You can't make this stuff up. I mean, it's all right there in front of you. And Nick is doing a great job of piecing together the puzzle, as well as myself. I must pat myself on the back sometimes. All right, anyway, enough kidding aside. But I have to say, this is downright scary how all the clues are tying in with each other. He then asks, is this the only way out of the cube? He doesn't think so. Nick says, and I quote, I believe the way out can be found within, through enlightenment. However, these people are trying to become God, and either they will become God or they are going to make him very angry. And maybe this is how the Matrix resets. End quote. Now, I don't exactly understand this part of the post. I mean, there's a lot I could say, but I'll just leave it rest and get back to it. You know, if I have Nick on again, like I told you, I'm going to ask him about these things. Now, I don't exactly know if this is all true or not. Like, I'm not even sure if enlightenment could get you, if there is such a thing as enlightenment, or if it can get you outside of the matrix. There's probably a lot I can say all this, but I'll just leave it rest and get back to the post. So as Nick said earlier, the people at CERN also created the internet, which ironically uses www in every web address. This is quite ironic because www in Hebrew is 666. I'm sure that many of the people that watch my videos know of that. Coincidence? Again, probably not. Another coincidence that Nick mentioned in a recent interview is that there are 26 squares in a Rubik's Cube, and Saturn's tilt of axis is 26 degrees. This is just another strange coincidence, right? Nick believes the internet is another dimension, one that is able to interface with the mind of the demiurge. Interesting. It quite literally is another space, one where people across the world can talk to each other as if they were right next to each other. And this becomes even more obvious in virtual reality. An entire world with other real people in it exists right in your room right now. I certainly hope not. I don't want them to see what I'm doing. But there are other beings in your room as well. Ones made of code, devoid of true consciousness, says Nick. And the internet, this demonic dimension, will be the birthplace of a rogue artificial intelligence. And you know what Elon Musk said. He said, we are literally summoning the demon with artificial intelligence. Well, if Elon Musk is good for anything, he at least knows that. And Nick poses one final question to the thread, which asks, what will happen when literally everything is done online and everything is linked up to the cube? I think it'll be called Amazon Cube, and like everything will just go through Amazon. You'll just buy your house through Amazon, you'll buy your food through Amazon, you'll buy your cars through Amazon, and Jeff Bezos will be king of Saturn. All right, let me give you my final summation here on this post. Again, thank you, Nick, for making it. First, I don't think it's in any way a complete theory of the Saturn time cube. It's a Twitter thread and not a research paper or a book. And I don't think that's how Nick planned it to be. He just planned to make a Twitter thread. He kept going and going. Now, a lot of information was left off. And some of that information can be found in the work of David Icke, who also talks about Saturn. In his Saturn is not what you think it is. And there's definitely more to this story for sure. So let me know if you want me to research it and make a follow-up video with what I find. I'm already making a list. I know we got to talk about viruses. We've got to do anti-gravity too. It's all right up here. It's coming. And I feel like Nick only scratched the surface, and there's probably so much more to this. And if you guys enjoyed this video, please give me a like and subscribe to be notified of my latest videos. And remember, you gotta click that notification bell or you may not see my videos. Well, thank you all for coming with me this far. I really hope you enjoyed it and found it enlightening. And I'll see you all very soon.
What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? And look for drama, promise I'm not gonna compete.
Number 2, my personal favorite, the jump cut. It's going to be just that, to jump around a scene with the intent of speeding up time. Now this can be done for comedic effect, but also as a way to simply demonstrate the passing of time. Usually it's going to be taking one long take, cutting it up throughout the middle, and then putting it all together into one piece.
Oh, nothing's on! This show sucks! This is not good enough! Well, I'll sap that.
Zap, zap, zap that, zap, zap, nothing's on the television. Zap, zap, zap that, I've been sitting here for hours but nothing is on. Zap, zap, zap that, zap, zap, all I see is only crap. Zap, zap, zap that, zap, zap, it doesn't even make sense at all.
Hi, you're on a rock, floating in space. Pretty cool, huh? Some of it's water. Fuck it. Actually, most of it's water. I can't even get from here to there without buying a boat. It's sad. I'm sad. I miss you. How did this happen? A long time ago, actually never, and also now, nothing is nowhere. When? Never. Makes sense, right? Like I said, it didn't happen. Nothing was never anywhere. That's why it's been everywhere. It's been so everywhere, you don't need a where. You don't even need a when. That's how every it gets.
Now on to today's video, which is titled Quantum Computers, Angels and Demons, Gods and Monsters. Last video I talked about the spider and the fly mentioned in Q Drop 350 and connected some possibilities as to what that could mean. It wasn't long before I discovered quantum computers have a lot to do with the web. I also had learned and shared with you that when we are dealing with today's aliens, these are merely the demons of yesterday. I am seeing that we are very much on the right track. Quantum technology and computing, as I research it more and more, clearly seeks to reach into other dimensions or multiverses for more knowledge in what they would have you think is evolution of mankind. Since the fall from the garden, man has been trying to recreate himself as God and obtain these secrets to eternal life. This pursuit is in pure disobedience to God's word, which tells us that salvation is in Jesus Christ, who has reconciled us back to God and has already promised to return to him in eternity after death on earth. These pursuits through quantum computing and AI are truly at the very core satanic. So first, let's dive more into quantum computers, how they work, who started the first company, and other quantum details. The first quantum computers were officially sold in 2013 and introduced to the world that year by a company called D-Wave. But going back, a Harvard Business School case study was written on the D-Wave computer all the way back in 2003. A man named Geordie Rose frequently spoke about the D-Wave computer with excitement as to its capabilities and potential. That's no wonder, because Geordie Rose was a founder of the company. He founded D-Wave in 1999, was CEO from 1999 to 2003, and then CTO from 2004 to 2016. He co-founded Kindred then in 2014. Kindred is an AGI company whose mission is to build machines with human-like intelligence. D-Wave designs and builds a number of complex technologies and integrates them to create the world's first quantum computers. The company's customers include Google, NASA, Lockheed Martin, Los Alamos, and U.S. government agencies, and investors include DFJ, which Steve Jurvetson has been on the board since 2003, Goldman Sachs, Jeff Bezos, and In-Q-Tel. And it should be no surprise to anyone that the first two owners of the D-Wave computer in 2013 were Google and NASA. The way a quantum computer must work is to build a refrigerator of sorts, or else the quantum technology cannot take place. When you see images of these computers, they resemble the older generation computers that were very large and required much cooling to function. One incredible difference is that the D-Wave computer needs to be cooled to just above absolute zero in order to function. This is why it resembles the old large apparatuses. Oppositely though, the actual computer chip, which contains 2,000 of the tiny qubits, is quite small. A lattice of these 2,000 tiny superconducting devices is chilled close to absolute zero to harness quantum effects, according to the D-Wave website. Quote, "A user models a problem into a search for the lowest energy point in a vast landscape. The processor considers all possibilities simultaneously to determine the lowest energy and the values that produce it. Multiple solutions are returned to the user, scaled to show optimal answers," end quote. So far, it doesn't really seem like anyone really understands these quantum effects. In fact, they seem not to know where this information is going and coming back from. They know it's happening, and happening faster than any other computer to date, as it can compute problems simultaneously, if you recall when I talked about the computer in person of interest in the video called Who is Q? They don't really know where it is going when it's doing this. Strange, don't you think? Well, let's take a look at Geordie Rose for a moment. Who is he? Well, he's a guy from Canada who has money and ability and the knowledge to fund this sort of supercomputer and technology. He is a huge proponent of quantum computing and AI.
Follow theoretical physics, but there is a very clear prediction that our most successful theory of nature makes, and that is that there are an enormous number, mind-bogglingly large number, of parallel realities. But science has reached the point now where we can build machines that exploit those other worlds. And quantum computers are perhaps the most exciting of all of these that we have within, or almost within, our grasp right now. So people from a physics background love this. They want to understand the world. They want to understand the universe, how it all works. There's another type of person who tends to come from the computer science side that's like, yeah, okay, that's all great. But there's a different thing going on here, which is just as exciting, if not more, and that these machines that supposedly can do this wild stuff, let's forget about how they work, if you could build one, could solve problems that you could never, ever solve with any computer of the sort that we built. If you took every single atom of silicon in the world and made the most sophisticated conventional Intel-style processor that you could build, there are problems we know of that I could write down on a sheet of paper that you could never, ever, ever solve with that thing, that you could with this kind of machine. There are, in fact, many of these machines deployed now in openly available research centers following the model that was used to introduce supercomputers to the world. They're too big and ornery and difficult to operate to put in your home, too expensive also. But you can give them to a place which will manage them as a shared resource that will offer that service to the world. And there are two of these now. One of them is at the University of Southern California, was recently installed at NASA. And Google was the primary interested party that pulled this whole thing together. This is what they look like. There are two of them. These are from our lab in Burnaby in British Columbia. From the outside, they look like giant black monoliths. Refrigerator that cools these chips to almost absolute zero. Just a wisp, a fraction of a degree above absolute zero. Hundreds of times colder than interstellar space. Have a thing called a pulse tube, which emits a sound roughly once per second, which sounds eerily like a heartbeat. So if you have the opportunity to stand next to one of these machines, it is an awe-inspiring thing, at least for me. It feels like an altar to an alien god. They really are impressive machines.
Yikes, right? You hear what he's saying. I know you heard what he's saying unless you weren't paying attention, and if you weren't paying attention, I'd say go back and replay it and listen. So it wasn't long before Geordie Rose was founding a new company called Kindred. And let me show you a clip of Geordie Rose talking to an audience about his company, Kindred, and attempting to recruit new individuals to work for him.
Okay, so my previous company was D-Wave. I'll just show you a couple things. We built what are still the world's only quantum computers that you can buy. But just as an aside, because I thought it was funny, one of the interesting things that's happened from the D-Wave story is there's this gigantic conspiracy that's arisen on the internet that goes like this. What's happened is this idea has been hijacked to describe something called the Mandela Effect, which is this thing where the past changes. So think about something you know to be true from the past. And then imagine you went out on the internet and you can't find it at all. It's not there. It doesn't match with your experience. So these people think that D-Wave is responsible. And CERN is a complete and utter transformative change that of the likes of which has never been seen before in the history of humanity, making the Industrial Revolution look like a little tiny blip on the path that humans have taken from when we emerged from the ooze a few billion years ago. We are right on the verge of that transition now. So what does this have to do with aliens? So Sam Harris, who I quite admire, is a very interesting guy, was reciting this parable at a TED Talk that he was giving, and it goes something like this. So I am, say I'm the President of the United States. So I receive this message from the heavens. So my microwave dish, my SETI dish, finally captures something. And what it says is, in 50 years, or 13 years, we're coming to your planet. You got to be ready. Now just imagine what would happen if that happened. A super intelligent alien race beamed down a message to all of us Earthlings saying, we're coming July 13th, 2030, and boy, you better be ready because the mothership is landing right on the front lawn of the White House or wherever you wanted to land on that day. The amount of resources that would be marshaled to try to figure out what to do would encompass the whole world. AI is just like that. So when this thing that I'm talking about happens, it's going to be exactly the thing that you're thinking about those super intelligent AIs. So the one thing I can tell you is they're not going to be like us. So alien means, different. These things that we're building are not going to be people. They might be really smart, they might be really good at all sorts of different things, but they're not going to be like us. They're going to be aliens. And they're going to be, I'm sorry to say, way smarter than every single person in this room in ways that we can't even comprehend. So this, of course, triggers a lot of alarm. One of the guys who talks about this is Elon, who says things like this, like, when you do this, beware. This is an attitude that some are having, this emerging alarmism about the way this is going to go. But these words, demons, doesn't capture the essence of what's happening here. I don't know if any of you are turn-of-the-century weird fiction fans, but there's this guy named H.P. Lovecraft, who's a very famous American weird fiction author. And he espoused a view which is called cosmicism. And the essence of cosmicism is cosmic indifference. So what he was saying is basically, yes, there are these massively intelligent entities out there, but they're not good, they're not evil. They just don't give a shit about you even in the slightest. The same way that you don't care about an ant is the same way they're not going to care about you. And these things that we're summoning into the world now are not demons, they're not evil, but they're more like the Lovecraftian great old ones. There are entities that are not necessarily going to be aligned with what we want. So this transition is really, really massively important for our entire species to navigate, and underneath it all is this rising tsunami that, if we're not careful, is going to wipe us all out. On that pleasant note, we're hiring people to try to make something like this happen. Technology is a double-edged sword. Even something like this, it's agnostic. It depends who wields it.
As you saw, Gordy has no problem admitting what he is trying to accomplish. He wants to reach demons and demonic intelligence to further his work. Note the symbol on his shirt, the logo for Kindred. We see this over and over with the occult and the Ouroboros, and specifically alchemy. Well, it turns out Gordy didn't stay long with Kindred, and he moved on to found and work as a chief science officer at Sanctuary AI. I can't tell you why he's moving around so frequently in recent years, but it could indicate a deeper rooted personal issue on his part, in my opinion. I found a website called gr.ai, which appears to be Gordy Rose's official profile website, since it's his initials .ai. It was informative in many ways that he intended and also likely did not. Noting his music likes, none of them could be remotely considered godly. He's had DNA testing done by a company called Illumina. He also had his Fitbit link connected, and I clicked on that link and saw he doesn't really seem to work out with it anymore, or possibly doesn't work out at all. Or perhaps he is starting up multiple companies in order to rush the technology to the people, and is just possibly putting his health on the back burner. We will have to watch and see. So what's the ultimate goal here? It is imperative to understand Satan's goal since recorded history in Genesis, and that is to contaminate the whole human population. Let's recall Genesis 6, verses 3 through 5. So the Lord said, "My spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal, his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on earth in those days, and afterwards as well, when the sons of God had relations with the daughters of men, and they bore them children who became the mighty men of old, men of renown. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great upon the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was altogether evil all the time." This passage tells us that fallen angels somehow bred and or inserted their DNA into human women and created a new race of the Nephilim out of wrath of man, or, more likely, to build up Satan's armies. We also know, when we look to Enoch, that then the people allowed the fallen angels to teach them how to make weapons of war, antimony for makeup, alchemy, cursing, vampirism, cannibalism, genetic modification of animals creating beasts, astrology and sun worship, and abortion. It sounds like the scripture from Ecclesiastes 1:9 is extremely accurate when telling us, quote, "What has been will be again, what has been done will be done again, there is nothing new under the sun," end quote. And so we know, as in the days of Noah, will the Son of Man come again, when all these behaviors are being repeated. God cast a flood to rid the earth of the unearthly and ungodly beast man was creating, to wipe out the new race and to start fresh with God-fearing peoples. Yet here we are today, dabbling in genetic modification, abortion, alchemy, fiat currencies, astrology, and all the problems we saw before when men sought the intelligence of the fallen angels. This can be a lot to consider, so let me return to one of quantum computers' technological goals, which is to help create the New World Order hive mind of humanity. Now, I had watched a video and I can't find it, and it really doesn't matter because I think everyone here knows what the hive mind means, and if it doesn't, I'm pretty much going to explain it to you. And who gave this talk is less important than what he was talking about. So I will not have a link for this video, but when and if I find it, I will give you the link if you want it. So there's a man I listened to, and he explained the desired hive mind for humanity. He talks about bees and the bee swarm, which coincidentally brings us back to the novel Prey by Michael Crichton in my video, The AI That Fell from the Sky. The hive mind speaker reminds us, as individuals we are intelligent, but as a group we are less so. He must have learned that from Men in Black. At least that is where I remember hearing that line.
Humans, for the most part, don't have a clue. They don't want one or need one either. They're happy. They think they have a good bead on things.
Well, why the big secret? People are smart. They can handle it.
A person is smart. People are dumb, panicky, dangerous animals, and you know it.
Anyway, he goes on to describe the well-oiled machine of the hive mind of the honeybee and how they all think and work for one purpose, and that's to thrive, make honey, and serve the queen. He makes it sound like we as humans are such a mess because our diversity complicates and decreases our ability for quality decision-making. We should just be all thinking alike and trying to reach one goal. If we could just be that way, then we would have no problems in this world. No conflict, no disagreements, no activism, and so on. All serving the greater good. In this way, humanity could be a well-oiled machine like the honeybee. He says that if the bee had the intelligent ability to see us in our ways, that it might think us less evolved than it.
Google believes there should only be one right answer for every question.
When you use Google, do you get more than one answer? Of course you do.
Yeah, of course.
Well, that's a bug.
Yeah.
We have more bugs per second in the world. Because we should be able to give you the right answer just once.
See, this is all part of Agenda 21. And the New World Order would have you thinking all alike, researching all alike, finding only the one answer that they want you to see. Consider now, alternatively to the honeybee, we have the killer bee. The Africanized bee, aka the killer bee, was created by Warwick Kerr via genetically modifying the African bee with European species of bee. According to Wikipedia, the Africanized bee was, quote, produced originally by crossbreeding of the East African lowland honeybee with various European honeybees such as the Italian honeybee and the Iberian honeybee. The Africanized honeybee was first introduced to Brazil in 1956 in an effort to increase honey production, but 26 swarms escaped quarantine in 1957. Since then, the hybrid has spread throughout South America and arrived in North America in 1985. Hives were found in South Texas of the United States in 1990, end quote. Recently, it has been documented that the killer bee has reached as far north as Maryland. Clearly observable is the aggressiveness of the killer bee. Its spread has been deadly and destructive to the more docile honeybee. What happens is that the killer bee hijacks the honeybee colony, annihilates it, and takes over. What we see, though, is that the killer bee cannot produce honey more efficiently, or even as efficiently as a more docile honeybee, and it is less capable of building the proper, well-oiled machine required to carry out the purpose that the God-made honeybee is simply capable of carrying out with no teaching, no training, or understanding outside of how God created them. What the hive mind guy forgot to mention was this. The reason the honeybee hive mind functions so well is because the honeybee does not have free will. It cannot come to Earth and do anything other than what God created it to do. The honeybee is purely obedient to its creator because it cannot be any other way. Now, where this guy may hold some merit in what he is saying would be to say we too would function as the well-oiled machine hive mind if we would only serve out our God-given purposes as God intended. When it comes to obedience and servitude to God, that is the only time the hive mind can compare to the honeybee, and that is the only time I can agree that it is most certainly a beautiful thing. Unfortunately, the New World Order would rather have you thinking to their ways and worshiping to their God, who is Lucifer. They wish to become gods themselves and utilize us to get there no matter the harm, hurt, death, or destruction to us. They must conform us to their will, hijack our spiritual God-given purposes, and create in us a slave hive mind mentality. They are in this way the killer bee and us the honeybee, or one could think of them as the spider and us the fly. The killer bee is aggressive in nature and steals from what was already God-made simply because they were man-made. We can compare this to Luciferians who would steal our God-given humanity to seek and see out their agenda in stealing what God made good. They become less creative and less productive, just as the killer bee produced less honey and not more, as was intended. Similarly, what God already made in us was working beautifully in the garden, but there were those who could not bear to see us walk with the Lord. Satan, Lucifer, and the fallen began the great deception that to this day is being perpetuated with eugenics, DNA and RNA replacement, quantum computing, and more. Thus, the plan to contaminate all humanity continues. Because for Satan, our decay and death was not enough. His plan failed once when God flooded the earth and rid the planet of Satan's defiled species. Ultimately, all of Satan's plans failed when Jesus Christ was born, the Son of God, made flesh to die for our sins and make us a new creation. A specific way we definitely see today of the continued push from the New World Order for the hive mind agenda is by repeating the same words across all mainstream media in order to control the narrative and steer us all away from truth. An example that I just discovered, which is getting a lot of mainstream attention, news coverage from mainstream media and supposed science, is this new church worships AI God. And it is called The Way of the Future, and it is being started by none other than Anthony Lewandowski, who is an ex-executive from Google. I'm going to include the website in the description box below. But again, what we're seeing here is someone from the very company that bought the first D-Wave computer and also has a lot of lawsuits on his hands because he sold his company Otto, which is OTTO, which I have to admit is pretty clever. It was an automatic driving car. He sold that to Uber for several million, something like $6.8 million. And he has lawsuits now because these cars are hitting people. But here he is going to start a new church to worship AI as God. Again, the goal here is to contaminate the human population. And part of the goal includes making humans believe there is evolution and the ability to further evolve and ultimately attain godlike status for ourselves. There is nothing new under the sun means that we are now what we always have been since creation, intelligent human beings in God's likeness. Our intelligence now is not more enhanced or advanced than any other time. In fact, everything we see today as far as technology was likely already superseded in the past. We would do best to humble ourselves before the Lord, asking God's pathway and purpose for us, and to pray for growing wisdom and discernment from God alone. We have been warned that Satan will pursue us until the end, working harder and more steadfastly than ever, and we must be of a sober mind in this battle so as not to lose sight. There is no further secret knowledge that must be attained. We have it all. We have more than we know. As for quantum computing and AI, there is no stopping what's coming. Mankind will never cease this desire to become God, and the devil will never cease promising mankind he can attain this. This does not mean I believe that all people working with quantum computing are evil, nor do I believe they all have evil intentions. More likely, there will be great accomplishments and new ways to enjoy this life with this technology. God can make good from anything if we are of a sober mind and discerning when being a part of all that will continue to happen around us. We are not to be afraid and hide away from the world. We are to continue to walk in the light, bringing the kingdom of God and truth to others until our death on this earth. Continue to humble yourselves before God and be grateful for what He has given you. Turn to Scripture for truth, stay in safe fellowship, and enjoy the peace and joy in this life that was promised to you. Thank you, friends and patriots. I am so grateful for you, and I am praying for all of you in the name of Jesus. Good night.
Hey, what's up, YouTube? It's Richie from Boston. Today's the 2nd of December, 2017, and I literally want every single person to like and share this video wherever they can, because this is the most important thing I've ever seen on the internet, and it backs up every single solitary quote-unquote conspiracy theory we've ever talked about. This is straight from the horse's mouth. If you've followed me over the years, you've seen the veritable cornucopia of videos I've put up about CERN. CERN, on and on and on and on it goes. I had Anthony Patch on with me for about 4 months. We did a couple of shows a week. If you were not aware of that, it's been going on for quite a while. It was going on for quite a while. Anthony went his way, I went my way. We don't agree about everything, but still, same arena is what it is. Now, everyone's seen these videos and these clips right here. Everybody has seen Geordie Rose, the finance guy behind the D-Wave quantum computer, explain that it's like an alien, it's like kneeling at the altar of an alien god. We've all heard them ad nauseum talking about pulling resources out of other dimensions and storing them in the qubit, which is the chip that runs the D-Wave quantum computer. Now, take a look right here. You can't miss this, okay? You really can't miss this. The word demon is right there in the word D-Wave. There's no two ways about that. D-E-M-A-N. And of course, that's coincidental. It's the same thing. It's the same coincidence that puts the 666 in the CERN logo. But this video is going to be able to prove to anyone that you know exactly what these guys are doing with their own word. A lot of people think that Geordie Rose is the inventor of the D-Wave. Geordie Rose is the money man behind D-Wave. This guy, for the most part, is one of the brainchilds.
I have heard this word quantum computing. It's often, people have the misconception that it's some kind of newfangled supercomputer. It's decidedly not that. Quantum computers allow us to access hidden features of nature, new dimensions, and if we can access these sort of hidden dimensions at scale, we could have unimaginable computing power.
Okay, so we've all heard that ad nauseum. These guys are not shy about it. They are straight up telling us they're pulling other dimensional beings and information from these beings, the all-seeing gods, whatever you want to call them, and they're bringing them back to our planet. How about that? Now, here's Geordie Rose in July talking in Vancouver, British Columbia, to a bunch of computer programming students, and he's trying to encourage them to come work for D-Wave. Now, Kindred, the first place you ever heard about Kindred on the internet was on this channel right here. I was talking about Kindred before anyone even knew what it was. Okay, if you guys remember, several months ago, I put out a video where the people at Kindred, which is the creator of the D-Wave, the finance guy behind the D-Wave quantum computer, Geordie Rose, he started a website, and I put it up. I'm going to say I was the first one to put it up. And when we put the video, when we put the website link up, there was nothing on it. It was okay, so you see that. I put this up a long time ago, and now this plays. Now, real quick, let me show you somebody. These are drawings done by a writer called H.P. Lovecraft. H.P. Lovecraft is a very strange person whose both of his parents ended up committed. This guy admittedly had night terrors, and he wrote, quote-unquote, science fiction. Parents were committed. He wanted to be a professional astronomer, but never finished high schools. He was best buddies with Harry Houdini, another person who was deeply steeped in the occult. He wrote 100,000 letters in his lifetime, didn't like sex. He suffered night terrors. He inspired Batman, Black Sabbath, South Park, and more. He's not buried under his headstone. And Kulu is one of the drawings I was just showing you. Now, why am I talking about H.P. Lovecraft? Well, because I'm not the only one talking about H.P. Lovecraft. I knew there would be something about the occult. Now, listen to this. Here's a video I put up about a year and a half ago, and it clearly shows CERN alluding to the Mandela Effect. These guys were basically flaunting, or they were playing along, basically telling us that they were behind the Mandela Effect. Now, why am I showing you H.P. Lovecraft? Why am I talking about the Mandela Effect? Okay, here we go. Here's Jody Rose in his own words explaining that what they're pulling through from other dimensions, it wouldn't be accurate to call them demons because demons doesn't quite sum it up. In this video right here, you're going to hear Jody Rose in his own words explain that they have opened a literal tsunami and that mankind is not going to be ready for this. Here's Jordy in July talking about the Mandela Effect, the quantum key to the pit, and the rumors that CERN and D-Wave are behind the Mandela Effect. In his own words.
Over the years there, I got sent pajamas, a whole bunch of stuff. There's lots of interesting things that happen when you build something like a quantum computer. But just as an aside, because I thought it was funny, one of the interesting things that's happened from the D-Wave story is there's this gigantic conspiracy that's arisen on the internet that goes like this. So D-Wave built quantum computers. The way that they work, if you know how this works, is one of the interpretations is that you tap into these parallel universes and they do computations. Sounds really weird, but...
Notice that he tries to ridicule his own words. It sounds really weird. They tap into other dimensions, but he's clearly showing Anthony Patch, and he just basically glosses over the whole thing. But this is going to get much, much more serious. Now, and I also am playing this at a faster speed to avoid a copyright strike. So there's that.
What's happened is this idea has been hijacked to describe something called the Mandela Effect, which is this thing where the past changes. So think about something you know to be true from the past. And then imagine you went out on the internet and you can't find it at all. It's not there. It doesn't match with your experience. So these people think that D-Wave is responsible, and CERN. And of course, the quantum key to the abyss factors into it somehow. I'm not exactly sure how. Okay, so that's just D-Wave. I did that for about 15 years.
Now, before I made this video, I called and I texted Anthony Patch to get him to comment on this, and he hasn't gotten back to me, and he probably won't. So there's that, because, why not? At any rate, this gets much worse. In this video, he's saying that he's basically done with D-Wave, and he's working with Kindred, and they're going to make AI robots that can do every single solitary thing a human can do, but better. Now, notice the symbolism on his shirt, because these guys are loaded with it, because everything that they're doing is on the occult level, which is why they surround themselves with symbolism at all time. They have to. It's part of the deal. You see what I'm saying? It's all coincidental, but these guys are constantly and always wearing the symbolism. But I digress.
What you've heard about AI is not what we mean by AI. What we mean by AI is a software system that can do literally anything that a human can do. Literally anything. And obviously, computers are better at things than people in lots of different ways. So now imagine, not only can they do everything that a human can do, but they can do everything that the best human at any task could do better than them. So imagine there was the mental Olympics of the 100-meter dash, and Usain Bolt is the fastest person. Now imagine that's some kind of a mental thing, like writing a novel or writing whatever. Imagine now that the thing is so much faster than Usain Bolt, like, for example, it's a spaceship. Yeah. It's still doing the same thing, but it's doing it so much better because we're limited, because we're people. So what Kindred is trying to do is solve this problem. How do you build machines that are better than people at everything? Now, there's a mental block that we have here when we think about this. Because when you think about that, one of your questions might be, for example, what are the applications of this? So imagine this. Imagine, for $10, let's say, I could build a machine, like a little robot that had fingers and eyes and all that, and it could do your job better than you, no matter what it is, and I could sell that to your employer for, say, $15 and make a profit, instead of having to pay you $100,000 a year.
So right off the bat, this goes back to the video that TruthStream Media put out a year and a half or so ago called Obsolete, where they are literally going to replace humanity in no one will have any jobs whatsoever if these guys get their wish, because they're bringing through demonic entities. Now, does that sound like a conspiracy theory? Of course it does. But do you know where that comes from? The horse's mouth. Continue listening, and he is going to straight up say it. Hey, what's up, YouTube? It's Richie from Boston. Today's the 11th of May, 2017, and I have been explaining to you for just about 2 years now exactly what the D-Wave quantum computer actually is. It's literally and only a superhighway of information transfer between our reality and other dimensions. And it's no secret. These guys literally say it straight up. And if you can hear them, you can hear them. If you can't, you never will. Continue to be a science fanboy, walking around thinking you know everything, when in fact these guys are simply getting information from other dimensional beings that we're not supposed to be talking with and building our own demise. Where do you think they came up with the information to hang something in an electromagnetically shielded box at ridiculous below Kelvin temperatures that are allegedly colder than outer space, if there was such a thing, to do exactly what they're doing? Well, they've done it with symbolism, rituals, and sacrifices like they always have. And look at what they're doing. They're mapping the human brain and they're reproducing the brain. And look at the people that own the D-Waves. Take a look at that list right there. Do you see anything suspicious in there? Just look at the symbolism right off the bat. I mean, the word Satan is right there in front of your face. And then you have Google and the alphabets. But that's not what this article is about. A subscriber named Susie sent me this morning. And this is where they're slowly coming out with exactly what I told you. Scientists achieve direct counterfactual quantum communication for the first time. Now, if they're telling you about it, that means they've been doing it for a long time. They don't tell us things as they happen. They don't care about us. They just don't care about us. If you haven't figured that out yet, go back to your soda pop and your sports and your television. This is not the channel for you. But for those that really want to know what's going on, quantum communication is a strange beast. They're telling you right there. But one of the weirdest proposed forms is called counterfactual communication, a type of quantum communications where no particles travel between two recipients. Theoretical physicists have long proposed that such a form of communication would be possible, but now for the first time they have been able to achieve it, transferring a black and white, there's your Freemasonic symbolism right there, bitmap image from one location to another without sending any physical particles. Do you understand what that means? They transferred information without actually sending anything. Do you get it? Do you think it's a coincidence that it shows a dark hole going down to nowhere? Do you get where they're saying strange beast, quantum communication? I've been telling you this for well over a year now, and Anthony Patch concurred. This is nothing more than what it always was. It's a large Ouija board. The D-Wave allows them to communicate freely back and forth with other dimensional beings that are trying to get into our reality in a physical form. And D-Wave allows those dimensional beings to communicate with scientists on this side and have them be the hands. The scientists in our dimension are following instructions from evil, fallen entities and are literally building a gateway for them to enter our reality. That's all there is to it. And articles like this back it right up. And that's all. I'll leave links in the description. Richie from Boston. I'm out.
Bioluminescence resonance energy transfer using luciferase immobilized quantum dots for self-illuminated photodynamic therapy. So Bill Gates is 100% behind quantum dot technology, directly responsible. And we see here, for it to work, it needs the luciferase enzyme. Okay, so you take the government scientific websites here, published, you point that out, and you say this is used for Bill Gates backed quantum dot and you show that to people. Links will be below. But that's all you need to do. And it's all in their descriptions here for how this works. Keywords, right? Energy transfer, bioluminescence, illumination. Would you look at that? Illumination. And with the word itself, Luciferus, because that is the correct pronunciation. Confirm that. Luciferus, like ace. So, call me crazy, but that sounds eerily similar to sounding to, say, Lucifer race or Lucifer's race. Isn't that interesting?
A chemical reaction that produces light within an organism is called bioluminescence. There's a wide variety of luminescent species, including some comb jellies, bacteria, dinoflagellates, fungi, and of course, the firefly. Organisms may use bioluminescence as a defense against predators, as a way to catch prey, or to attract a mate. But how exactly are they producing light? Fireflies express a protein called luciferase, which catalyzes a light-producing reaction. The reaction of luciferase takes place in two general steps. First is the adenylation of luciferin using ATP, and second is an oxidative decarboxylation of the luciferyl adenylate to form an electronically excited oxyluciferin. When the excited oxyluciferin moves back to the ground state, energy is released in the form of light. Although the exact mechanism is not known, the generally accepted mechanism is as follows. Luciferase first binds luciferin and ATP. Magnesium is needed to shield the negative charges on ATP. Luciferin acts as a nucleophile and attacks ATP to form a luciferyl adenylate still bound to the enzyme. Pyrophosphate is released. A residue in the active site of the enzyme then deprotonates the adenylate. The carb anion can now attack molecular oxygen. A ring is formed and AMP is released. This results in a high-energy dioxyethanone intermediate. The ring spontaneously breaks and we are left with electronically excited oxyluciferin and carbon dioxide. When oxyluciferin returns to the ground state, energy is released in the form of a photon of light. The excited oxyluciferin can tautomerize into the keto or enol form. Some scientists suggest that these two forms emit different wavelengths of light.
For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places.
Fuck this shit, I'm out. Fuck this shit, I'm out. No thanks. Don't mind me, I'ma just grab my stuff and leave. Excuse me, please. Fuck this shit, I'm out. Nope. Fuck this shit, I'm out. Alright then. I don't know what the fuck just happened, but I don't really care. I'ma get the fuck up out of here. Fuck this shit, I'm out.